Just as a disclaimer, the visuals of this video contain spoilers for Steins Gate Zero. Wow, time flies! Today marks the Steins Gate Zero anime's 7th anniversary. And honestly, it feels like it was just yesterday that I was still in high school watching every new episode week to week. But the Steins Gate Zero anime wasn't the only major Steins Gate related project that released back in 2018. The same year, Mages also dropped Steins Gate Elite. Unlike Robotics Notes Elite, which was a simple enhanced re-release that only featured occasional added scenes from the anime to improve the game's presentation, Steins Gate Elite was a fully animated remake of the original visual novel. By and large, the concept was for it to feature the original visual novel's text, but the anime's visuals, to make what Mages advertised as a definitive version of the story. In the end, of course, Steins Gate Elite wasn't truly a definitive version of Steins Gate. It had to cut over 35% of the original visual novel's lines due to a lack of corresponding animations. And even the new animated content they added in for Elite was noticeably poorer in quality compared to the content sourced from the anime. But Steins Gate Elite was nonetheless a fairly interesting concept for Mages to have experimented with. So the natural next question that came to people's minds, given the recency of the Steins Gate Zero anime, was what if they made a Steins Gate Zero Elite? At the time, fans suspected that such an endeavor might be quite difficult, since the Steins Gate Zero visual novel and Steins Gate Zero anime had too much content exclusive to one another. But nonetheless, what followed over the course of 2019 and 2020 would prove to be a very interesting turn of events. The year after the release of the Steins Gate Zero anime and Steins Gate Elite was 2019, the year of Steins Gate's 10th anniversary. And throughout 2019 and 2020, Mages announced a number of different anniversary projects to commemorate the occasion. Among these projects was a live event they held in January 2020, and it was during this event that they actually did it. They legitimately announced Steins Gate Zero Elite, a fully animated remake of the Steins Gate Zero visual novel, just like Steins Gate Elite. And the very prospect of a Steins Gate Zero Elite was quite exciting, because of the unique structure of Steins Gate Zero's story. Those of you who have gone through the Zero visual novel, the Zero anime, as well as some of the side material Steins Gate Zero was based off of, would know that because of the way Steins Gate Zero's narrative works, the Zero anime is effectively a final route for, or sequel to the Zero visual novel, rather than a conventional adaptation of it. Because of this, a Steins Gate Zero Elite taking the same sort of approach as Steins Gate Elite would require Mages and White Fox to newly animate a ridiculous amount of material. And this would thus require them to spend a crazy sum of money that would likely exceed their return on investment. But let's say we were in a hypothetical situation where they actually did this anyway. That would mean that Steins Gate Zero Elite would combine the stories of all the original Steins Gate Zero visual novel routes and the anime original final route to create one definitive version of Steins Gate Zero where you can get the full story in one package. This possibility kept many fans hopeful for what could prove to be a very promising game. It was only 9 months after this initial announcement that Mages unveiled new information surrounding the project at another live-streamed event in October of 2020, where they also had a couple of other announcements for SciEDV. A new trailer and tentative release date for Anonymous Code, an announcement of a Steins Gate thematic sequel, and a new trailer for Steins Gate Zero Elite. At the time, they announced that the release order for these projects was going to be Steins Gate Zero Elite, followed by Anonymous Code, and then finally followed by the thematic sequel. In addition to that, they also provided somewhat conflicting information regarding how Steins Gate Zero Elite would look. During this livestream, series creator Chiyomaru Shikura indicated that Steins Gate Zero Elite would feature route branching and additional animated content beyond what had been shown in the Steins Gate Zero anime. This may have suggested that Zero Elite would not simply be the anime in visual novel form, rather, it would be something closer to the original visual novel, but animated. Yet immediately after this event, series producer Tatsuya Matsubara suggested that because the Steins Gate Zero anime and Steins Gate Zero visual novel were so different from one another, the approach they'd taken with Steins Gate Elite would simply not be applicable to Steins Gate Zero Elite. He instead suggested that it would likely just be the Steins Gate Zero anime's narrative in visual novel form. I think it's technically possible to reconcile the two statements if their intention was to go for the same general route as the Steins Gate Zero anime, but with some new animation for completely original routes exclusive to Steins Gate Zero Elite, rather than exact remakes of the routes from the original Zero visual novel. I imagine such an approach would result in the new routes being pretty short though. Nonetheless, irrespective of which approach they were going to take with Steins Gate Zero Elite, since October 2020, details on the game have ranged from sparse to non-existent. At this point, it's been over 5 years since the game was originally announced. The most we've heard about Steins Gate Zero Elite ever since was back in 2022, when Shakura tweeted a response to a question about the game. He indicated that he could not give any details on the project at the time, and encouraged fans to wait for official news on the matter. It has now been 3 years since that tweet. That all leads us to the present day, where we're sitting here and wondering, what happened to Steins Gate Zero Elite? Has it been quietly cancelled? Or are we just playing the waiting game for it like we are with Steins Gate's thematic sequel? I guess only time will tell. There is a number of other announced side EV projects that have yet to see the light of day as of now, and there's always the precedent of Anonymous Code, which took 7 years to release after its original announcement. I guess if there is one potentially positive sign for Steins Gate Zero Elite, it is that Mugen's Steins Gate Zero pachinko machine from a few months ago features brand new animation for Steins Gate Zero that covers what was previously visual novel exclusive content. So maybe that new animation could serve a dual purpose for Steins Gate Zero Elite as well. But then again, Steins Gate had its own pachinko machines, and mages didn't end up reusing any animation from those in Steins Gate Elite. Nonetheless, the fact that they've made new Steins Gate Zero animations at all is a positive sign. But alas, we continue to wait for that time when our delusions become reality and Steins Gate Zero Elite comes to fruition. Making just the anime's route in visual novel form wouldn't be that hard to do, so I can't imagine it would be worthwhile to outright cancel the game. And heck, if they really wanted an easy Steins Gate game to rake in some money, they could always make a load region of Deja Vu Elite, where they reuse footage from the egoistic Poryomania OVA and the Steins Gate movie, while utilizing the movie's novelization as a base for most of the text. Nevertheless, please let me know in the comments what your hopes and expectations are for Steins Gate Zero Elite. Special thank you to Fasty for his help in the editing of this video script and the corresponding article over on Kitty Kitty Basara. And with that, I'll see you all around.
エル、プサイ、コングル